Hello, everyone. Nick Chavez here with Chavez and Valko, your key to immigration solutions. Here with my law partner, Martin Valko. Martin, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, Nick. Could be better, but for the recent events, at least the last couple of days, which we were gearing up to, but it's a reality now, and we're dealing with the fallout. So,
Right.
But other than that, I'm peachy. How about you?
Peachy, yeah. Well, folks, we'll go over some of the executive orders or immigration plans that Trump had announced upon becoming the new president. And while we do that, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to send us your questions. But first, before we begin, please don't forget to subscribe or follow us to get the latest immigration news, which you can bet will be often. Well, Martin, this came as no surprise. Trump and his advisors, Stephen Miller, they were all signaling that these changes were going to happen right before the transition, immediately after the elections. And what we plan to do is go over some of the highlights because there was a lot of executive orders that were issued, and I would say a good 25% or maybe even more had to do with immigration. So we'll begin with the most controversial one, which has to do with the birthright citizenship. Here, the executive order that was issued, and it was called something like protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. Well, basically what it does, it instructs the agencies to not issue documents. We're talking about passports, citizenship certificates to people with basically to any person whose mother was not here legally in the United States, or the mother was here temporary but not permanently lawful here. And basically that's the beginning of that discussion, right? The ending birthright citizenship. What do you think about that, Martin?
I think it's quite a foolish step. We're not the only country, as it's been told during the campaign, and even now in the last couple of days. There are many countries in the world that have this type of citizenship on the country's soil. I was interviewed this morning or this afternoon for a local station, and we had this discussion. And one of the points that I brought up was the U.S. and just like other countries are struggling with population, with the growth of populations and decline in populations. And from the data that I saw, this is going to affect about 7.5% or 250,000 of all babies born in the U.S. that would not be considered to be United States citizens. So, the president said that, there's an unconstitutional interpretation of the 14th Amendment that should get reviewed. And he said, if I can, and the order is out there. It is already challenged. So it's going to end up before a judge and then later on before the circuit court judges and end up with most likely with the Supreme Court that will have to review it and settle it. So, the alternative, it's amending the U.S. Constitution, which, as we all know, is not that easy. You're going to have 2/3 of the Congress and then have it ratified by 3/4 of all the states. But I think for now, this is going to get settled in some time by the Supreme Court.
Yeah, as soon as I read or heard about this policy of ending birthright citizenship, you can't do it through executive order. I knew that this was going to be a no-go. And as you mentioned, there's already at least 2 lawsuits challenging this executive order, and mainly because it's written in the language of the Constitution, right? Anybody who's born here, there's some exceptions, of course, but if you were born here in this soil, on U.S. soil, you're a citizen. You're guaranteed certain rights, and an executive order traditionally you can't override the Constitution with an executive order. You need something more than that, and as you mentioned, you do need a constitutional amendment, which would require, 2/3 majority, and it needs to be ratified by the states. So that's an uphill climb. But the good thing is that it's being challenged. This is not effective. It's not effective right away, and it's not something that's retroactive, from my understanding. Martin, I don't know if you have read differently, but this is something that would apply in the future for individuals who are now trying to get proof of citizenship.
So it's supposed to be enacted 30 days from yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
but with these lawsuits challenging
Yeah.
the order, it is likely to get stayed.
Right.
It essentially, the way I read it, so it's, when they say, especially it was kind of pitched if you have if it's born to undocumented mothers, but
Yep.
the order says that, but it also says people that are here in lawful status with pursuant to visitors visas, work visas,
Mm-hmm.
and in both instances, 1 and 2.
Yeah.
The way I read it is, unless the father was a lawful permanent resident of the U.S. citizen or U.S. citizen, in both instances, the child would not become a U.S. citizen. It's the wildest thing when I read it, because this initially was pitched if it's born to undocumented mothers.
Yeah, and this has been floating around for a long time. Stephen Miller and his gang have been wanting to make this part of the discussion, but I'm not too worried about it because it's something that is grounded in the Constitution, and it would be very difficult to overturn that. There's been only like 20 some amendments since the ratification of the Constitution, so. I'm pretty confident that this is not going to go through. That wasn't the only executive order that was issued yesterday. There was also an executive order, and this was called Securing Our Borders. And basically what it wants to do is reinstate this policy known as Remain in Mexico, which requires individuals who are applying for asylum at the southern border. It requires them that they remain outside the U.S. while they're waiting for their court hearing. Usually, if you're applying for asylum, upon entry, you're allowed in. They can give you parole. Your proceedings are here. You're allowed to seek an attorney. You go ahead and state what your residence is here, and as you wait for a notice of hearing. But for individuals who are subject under Remain in Mexico, they have to wait outside. And this is something that we've seen already under the first administration. And Biden, he went ahead and pulled the plug on that. But that is a concern. But in order for this to happen, you need Mexico to cooperate with the United States. It's not something that Trump can nilly-willy say, hey, individuals who are seeking relief here in the United States at the southern border, they have to wait for their hearing outside. And Mexico is going to house them. Mexico is going to detain them while they're waiting for their removal proceedings. Is something that would require Mexico to do, and I don't think we're at that point yet. What are your thoughts on Remain in Mexico?
Well, just like you said, it's just going to test our relationship with Mexico, and perhaps the Mexican president could go back and said, okay, well, how about keeping the name of the Gulf, the Gulf of Mexico. You know, if you want us to help you, yeah, it's a procedural it is logistical nightmare. I mean, those are thousands and upon thousands of people that will have to once again seek shelter and hopefully, you know, have the conditions for those days, weeks, and months sometimes. Because when they announced the CBP-1 app, and this is the app that was introduced by the Customs and Border Protection for the asylum seekers to use so they can properly check in and then be called in when they have an appointment.
Yeah.
My understanding is there were 30,000 outstanding appointments that got canceled. And you can see that in the media, you know, with people just being distraught because they don't know what's going to happen now. It was some order, right? I mean, there was before it really wasn't orderly as much as they tried to in cooperation with Mexico. And that CBP-1 app brought some order to the process, and now it's gone. That was the first thing that got disconnected, even before the inauguration speech that we're hearing that it's offline. So, you know, that's just going to be incredibly difficult. You know, with so many people, you know, waiting and waiting to get processed at the border.
Yeah, and they did away with CBP-1, right? And these measures, by the way, you know, CBP-1, they also did away with parole, but these measures led to a drastic decline in the illegal migrant flow we had last year. You know, our numbers are down. Not that many people, as compared as to previous years, have entered the United States illegally, and that's because these measures like CBP-1, these parole programs. You also had Mexico crack down on transiting foreign nationals who are on the way here. So, you know, this administration is actually, you know, they describes it as an invasion, as a national emergency, but in reality, he's inheriting something that is really not an issue. The drastic low numbers of people who are immigrating in the United States. So it's something to watch. The other measure that we're seeing is this return of, you know, we heard this a lot during COVID, is Title 42. Title 42. This is a public health law. If you remember, this law was implemented during COVID to prevent the entry of individuals who were seeking asylum. And what happened is that basically they weren't given a court date. They were just basically expelled. They said, you know what, you can't come in at all. But to do so, we needed to justify it through a major public health crisis. And here, as you mentioned, we had COVID. And it's interesting now with an executive order, if you see the language, he's saying that there are thousands and thousands of people who are coming to the border, and we don't know their medical background. We don't have the resources to ask them or detect any kind of communicable disease. And so therefore they present a public health problem. So we're going to use something that looks like Title 42 and try to use that as a way to restrict it. But it was never used. It was not a tool that's used on a permanent basis. It's not a tool that is meant to control migration. It's only a tool used to suspend migrant flow on a temporary basis and due to health reasons. We'll see what happens with that. I'm sure as the last time it was challenged on those grounds that it didn't really coincide with the public health concern. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens. And you can tell that they're trying to reach every single tool to restrict the flow of legal and illegal migration. But some of these tools are not meant to control immigration, or some of these measures are contrary to the law. There are other executive orders, and I'll go ahead and just kind of summarize them. There's there's an executive order that has to do with the sanctuary cities. They're restricting federal funds to go that for these so-called sanctuary cities who are, in their view, housing or making it very difficult for federal or ICE officers to carry out their duties. In reality, really, a sanctuary city is a city that has decided that they can't use up the resources to be doing an ICE agent's job. And instead, they're going to limit their involvement with that because they got other things to tackle, like crime, poverty, and they're using those resources for that instead of, acting like an ICE agent. And so really that's really the policy of these so-called sanctuary cities. But there is an attack on that kind of setup, and basically this executive order is proposing that restriction of federal funds. Something very interesting in that same executive order, and has to do with there's a section 7 of that executive order. I'm not going to geek out. But there it indicates a process of identifying, or a registration system, if you will, for those who, quote, unregistered illegal aliens. And we've seen something like this after September 11th, after the September 11th attacks. There were some measures to figure out, who's here in the United States, but it was limited. What are your thoughts on that, Martin?
Yeah, it's scary. That's all I can say. It's scary. I mean, it was in Sears. That's what we're talking about. Yeah. The entry and exits of registration of people, of non-citizens, and it was, you had a registration number. You had to check in, not just when you left and came back, but also regularly you had to come in, and it was really just limited to certain ethnicity in certain countries. And so we're going to see something similar here, although it wasn't explained well just yet, but it's we're heading to those times where we were, after 9/11, where attacks was instituted back in 2002, and it was in place for, I think it got suspended into 2011 by President Obama, and then totally dismantled in 2016, or 20, I think 2016, before Trump went to office. So, I'm sure there's got to get flushed out a little bit more, but it may call on people that are in the U.S. Undocumented, unlawfully, to come forward and register, and you can imagine the panic this is going to create, because the NCRs really applied to even those that had status. Yeah, they were leaving and coming back, and here you basically have to come forward. Right. So I guess something. This is something we grappled with when DACA was first introduced, where people said, well, this is de facto just kind of turning yourself in, and the government allowing you to stay, but they could change their mind. And so this is something similar, although, with DACA, you had something tangible in return. You had the work permit and stay. But I don't know who's going to come forward and get their name into this registration database.
Well, they make reference to this law that is in the books that requires registration for those who are entering with the visa. Obviously, we want to know who's here, and sure, they need to be registered, right? Interestingly, and it remains to be seen how they're going to implement this, but they want to expand that to individuals to everybody. So they're taking a law that has to do with registration and visa issuances, and expanding that to just about anybody. So I'm sure they're going to face significant legal challenges, but we'll see with that. The other executive order that kind of stood out was there's an executive order that has to do, and it's called Protecting the United States from Foreign Terrorists and others. So the moment you read that, you're already thinking about travel bans, and that's what we had last time, is the travel bans. Well, this order proposes a better vetting and screening for visa applicants. There's nothing wrong with that, but when there's right now, visa issuances are pretty much backlogged as it is, and we understand that it's important to check an applicant's background, but this is more geared toward making it impossible, where you're kind of deterring a person from applying for a visa because it's just going to take too long. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens there, Martin. And I'm sure you have a lot of clients who have employment-based visas, and I wonder how that's going to affect them. Other measures that there weren't in these executive orders, but these are things that we think might happen. Public charge is the return of public charge. Is the public charge is a rule for applicants who are applying for a green card, and they basically have to show that they are not going to rely on public welfare. We've had this in the books for a long time, but the evidence that you have to show when this public charge rule was first proposed and implemented under the first Trump administration was pretty harsh. They were asking for credit scores and everything. I don't know if you remember that, but it wasn't in effect for too long because it was challenged. But we can expect something like that, and I'm sure you're looking forward to those type of policies. They're reactivating. They haven't said when, but the policy regarding RFEs, requests for evidence, and that's going to be something that's going to cause more of a backlog. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mentioned the public charge, the infamous Form I-944, which made us feel like we are accountants. If you were putting together a mortgage application with tax returns and credit scores from one or more agencies, and it was something else. And then, of course, flashbacks of not leaving any fields empty. If you recall, the cases were getting sent back because you did not put none or not applicable in the field, and you have hundreds and hundreds of fields in these immigration forms that are being submitted with specific case types, and so that was happening. And of course, we could deny and not even have to issue an RFE if you're missing certain documents, which was typically a normal thing to issue an RFE. So yeah, fun times are coming back.
Yeah, fun times. Yeah. Well, this discussion about mass deportation, this is something that was designed to cause fear, and we've already seen it in places like Chicago. Just today, one of the officials had revoked one of the policies under Biden having to do with sensitive areas. So we don't want ICE agents to be going into churches and schools. It's a sensitive area. And now, that policy has been revoked, and now ICE can go into those areas. But this is all designed to cause fear. The reality is that they don't have resources, and we saw that too. I think the director, his name escapes me, but mentioned that. He said that look, it's kind of a reality check. We don't have resources to go after everyone. So right now, as it stands, I imagine just to get those splashy headlines, there'll be raids. in concentrated areas. And this is something that's going to be publicized, and it'll generate fear, and that's what they want. But in reality, right now, they're going after the low-hanging fruit, which are individuals who are in the criminal justice system right now. They're individuals who are arrested for a criminal offense, and they're in the system, and this is how they get detected by immigration. So they're going after them, which is the current priority, by the way. That's it's always been that way. But also individuals who have deportation orders, people who, for example, who have to appear or present themselves, report, I should say, to an immigration appointment with ICE, check-in appointments. Those individuals, they need to worry, because this is the low-hanging fruit that they're talking about, and they may execute those orders. If you do have a deportation order, or if you're unsure, I think now is the time to speak with an immigration lawyer and see if there is an option, if there's a possibility to reopen your removal order. There are ways, but that takes time, and the best time to do it is now. Speaking of your rights, there's a lot of we've already passed literature out. We posted information about what you should do if you are arrested. The basic information that you probably already know, right? You have the right to remain silent. If the officer asks about your immigration status, you don't have to say anything. You can tell the officer, hey, am I being arrested? And if the answer is no, you can walk away. Do not sign any documents without a lawyer. This is important too, because if you find yourself under the custody of immigration, they transfer you over and they process you. They will flash a document in front of you for a it's essentially you're self-deporting, but it's called voluntary departure, a voluntary return. It makes their job easier just by sending you back rather than processing you and you having to go to court. So it's important you don't sign any documents, because if you do sign a document, you could be signing a document that would renunciate your right to appear in front of a judge and ask for relief. And some individuals do have an opportunity to request relief because of the time they've been here, and their family roots and ties that they have here in the United States. Martin, we've developed an app precisely for this. To that.
Yeah. Back in 2018, during Trump 1.0, we developed this app called Law Pilot Guardian. And this is precisely for these situations. As Nick indicated, you want to know typically what to say and what not to say, and what he had indicated are the right things to do. For more information, to drill down to understand what rights you have, what you should say, what you shouldn't say. For example, when you are driving, if you get a visit at your workplace, or if you're at home, it has this app has just so much information on it, so that you could learn, you can read, you can listen to it. We also send regularly any breaking news in immigration, so you don't have to worry if you heard something on the radio or saw something on TV. You could also receive those news through push notifications on the app. If you recently heard it in the media as well, there are consulates out there, foreign governments that are building apps so you could notify your loved ones, and even their consulates of being detained. And this is specifically this red button. That is us in 2018. There were other apps on the market, but we specifically added more features, notification, But most importantly, what's important is when something like that happens, when you are in this situation where you get pulled over by police or there's a raid at the workplace, when you activate the red button, the attorney, and really this is the most important part, aside from other apps on the market, this app, it connects you to us or any other attorney that provides the service. But that is the most important thing. In this instance, when everything is falling down on you, we are, in addition to your family members, your emergency contacts that you add on there, we get notified of your location, your GPS location. So we immediately can see which location did you send the alert from. We can see exactly, we can zoom in on the map, on the Google Maps, and see where you were. And also we could listen to the encounter. So whoever you were speaking with, whether it was police or any other law enforcement or ICE, that information is being recorded in real time and uploaded with internet coverage to the cloud. So us, again, as lawyers that know your case, that have, whether you have case with us, whether we've already consulted with you, we have that information and we can act. We can reach out to your family. We can set up a plan, as opposed to having your family just scrambling at night at 2 o'clock in the morning, because we monitor this 24/7 with a team. And so instead of your loved ones scrambling, trying to find somebody, we're already notified. We know where you were and who you were with and what was said, and all of that is preserved, because when you get detained, the phone gets detained with you, but the information, the location, the audio recording is in the cloud for our recording. So anyways, I hope that never happens. I hope that you don't get to that, you don't find yourself in that position, in that situation. But with these enhanced procedures and orders that are being released, things will likely happen, right? They will go to the cities and communities, and they may go to schools, they may go to churches, they may go to hospitals, as I said. So having this on the phone is a lifesaver, right? Yeah. You get the information, you get the news, you get to know your rights. Any other things, you can see, have you been a victim of a crime? Have you been abused? And you can see other resources. Know your rights, of course, what Nick just mentioned, and of course the red button. I mean, this is why Nick and I had built this a few years back, because we, as immigration attorneys, wanted to provide that peace of mind to our clients out there.
Yeah. So yeah, you can check this out. I'll put a link in the description, or a link should already be there. But we're going to go ahead and repurpose the video anyways, and we'll put that in if you guys want to check it out. We do have some time for some questions. I know I have to boogie out in a while. This is Stephen Strange, and he asks if you can use parole in place for family members if you're in the military part-time. If you can use parole in place. So military parole in place is a program that currently is available if you are a family member of a person who's serving in the military or have been honorably discharged. Active service is what you can do, but you don't have to be in active service. You can be in the reserves under certain circumstances. You can do that as well. But part-time, I would imagine that's what you're referring to. If you are in the select reserve, the ready reserve, with people who are in the National Guard, for example, and who have finished training, they are eligible to, or if that's the case, a family member can apply for military parole in place under those circumstances. Brenda Adiano, she's asking, can ICE come look for a family member that has been deported already? Well, this is that low-hanging fruit that we were talking about. I don't, for individuals who are currently reporting and have deportation orders, I think they are the ones that they're looking at. If you have a prior deportation order, but you have something going on like DACA, I'm not worried about it. But if you have a prior deportation order that, let's just say it's 20 years old, they're not going to be knocking at doors for that, because it's impossible to find that person. So, but there's ways of discovering that, and it's usually associated when a person comes to the attention of a police officer, or they've been arrested and they are transferred over. They're processed and booked, and in these counties, there's someone there that's checking a person's history, immigration history, and this is where they'll find that out. But unless you come across a law enforcement officer, if you had a prior deportation order a long time ago, I mean, it's virtually impossible for them to discover that. Thank you for your question, Stephen and Brenda. We do have a question here. Miguel is asking a question. Miguel, voy a hacer le voy a tener un programa en español este fin de semana o en esta semana, y con todo gusto lo hacemos en español. Brenda does ask again if we're allowed to identify, if you get caught or if you're stopped, should you identify yourselves with a DACA card? I mean, you're actually, if an immigration officer asking you for paperwork and you do have papers, it's mandatory. You have to provide them a copy of that. But with DACA, I'm not worried at this point. Martin, what are your thoughts?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's protection. There was a recent DACA decision that it kind of split, and but for the current DACA grantees, they should be fine. And certainly you want to use it as an ID. If you with that, you should have your driver's license, obviously, if you're driving, but you are 100% safe to present it, because that's your, so to speak, protection.
Yeah. Speaking of DACA, I mean, there was last Friday, the news dropped of a court decision, appeals court, the Fifth Circuit went ahead and said that the DACA, the regulations were not lawful, basically agreeing with the lower court. It's kind of a confusing order, but the bottom line is that, although the judge or the court said that DACA was not a legal program, for the meantime, they are allowing individuals who have DACA to renew. So it's business as usual until further notice. And it's very difficult to know at this point. It's what's going to happen. Is it going to go up here? Is it going to go in front of the Supreme Court? Is this case, will it be presented again with the Fifth Circuit with a full bench, or is this case going to the district court? We could see a settlement. We'll see. But it's important to subscribe and follow us as soon as we learn as soon as we get the latest developments on that, we'll pass that along and we'll share that with y'all. We got a shout out from Jose Manuel. Thank you, Jose. Thank you for the shout out. We're here to help. This is why we do it. We've been doing these shows for like 5 years, 6 years. It was right around the pandemic, and this is the reason. It's a lot of people have doubts. A lot of people have fear. They just want to get a second opinion sometimes, and we'll tell it as it is. We'll shoot straight with y'all, and if it doesn't look good, then it doesn't look good. But with respect to your particular case, it's very important that you speak with a lawyer. In these shows, we're only getting some information. We're not digging in deep, and that's important to know. But if you want your case to be analyzed, I think it's important to speak with an immigration lawyer, especially if you have some sort of immigration history, like a prior deportation order. Thank you, Jose Manuel. With that, just in closing, I would like to thank everyone for watching our show. Please remember to follow us, hit subscribe, or you can leave a comment or question later, and I'll try to get to it. Any last words, Martin?
No, that's you said it all.
I do have one more
We're here
question.
for
I'm
you.
sorry. And I promised Paco Cruz, who's listening, and unfortunately, it's not shown on the screen because this is Instagram. Don't ask me why. It's just like that. But Paco Cruz asks, since he filed the parole in place program, since the parole in place program was canceled, would it be okay to live at the address I provided since it's all on file with USCIS? I mean, their policy is really not to share that information with ICE unless there is a reason to, and I don't, that's kind of a personal. I mean, it's hard to say. It's hard to predict what ICE is going to do in the first place. But as a matter of policy, those individuals who gave their information to USCIS, and doesn't have to be parole in place. It could be, an I-130 petition or a DACA. Whenever you put information out, it's, the government has it. The question is, what are they going to do with that information? And as a matter of policy, unless a person is really committed serious crimes, I wouldn't think that USCIS would pass that along. But it's important to keep on top of the news, because these policies could change. All right, everyone. With that, we'll close. Thank you for hearing us out, and for those who are para aquellas personas que nos están escribiendo en español, vamos a hacer un show esta semana. Okay, thank you, guys.
Till next time. Take care. Bye-bye.